Welcome back to Orange Chat Reviews, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. So, episode 101 of the Mystery Reviews. How y'all doing? Hope everybody's doing good. Let's say hello to the chat. We got Vanya and Riot Kitty in the chat. Hello, hello, hello. So, the hints that I gave for this one were The Long Game of Vengeance, Jealousy, Island Treasure, and Jacopo. This movie was done in 2002. It stars Jim Caviezel and Guy Pearce and Richard Harris. And it is one movie that absolutely is based on a book of a perfect vengeance. It is known as The Count of Monte Cristo. Jim Caviezel as Edmond Dantes was truly a great pick. Now, this movie is indeed about a Frenchman, and well, Jim Caviezel is not exactly French, but I think that this movie still did a good job with the cast because honestly, Guy Pearce as Mondego, Fernand Mondego, was a great villainous choice because he plays it so freaking well that he's an unabashed villain. He just doesn't care about how he mistreats people, what he does that's illegal and whatnot. And I really do appreciate villains like that because it makes their fall so much better. And hello to Neozoic as well and Sexy Goth Girl. How you doing? Always good to see you guys and gals. So, yeah, in 2002, Kevin Reynolds adapted the old novel, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, telling the tale of Edmond Dantes, falsely imprisoned by his jealous friend. After escaping and finding a hidden treasure, he uses his newfound resources in the ultimate tale of vengeance. There are also starring in this movie are Dagmara Dominczyk. It's very Dominczzyk, folks. So yeah, Dominczyk. Richard Harris, Luis Guzman, who is always a pleasure to watch on screen. Henry Cavill in one of his earliest roles. Michael Wincott and Alex Norton as Napoleon. So this movie does begin with opening words. In 1814, the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte was exiled to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy. Fearing any attempt to rescue him, his British captors would shoot anyone who came ashore, no matter how innocent or desperate. And I love how when they show this, the screen is zooming in on the island of Elba. And then we transition to a boat seeking medical attention for a captain who fell ill. Edmond Dantes is rowing aboard with Guy Pearce, who's taking a drink. Now, this movie is not without its small faults and small mistakes. One such mistake is where Guy Pearce's bottle has details on the bottom that are worded like labels. They didn't have that kind of thing going on in they didn't have that kind of detail print on the bottom of bottles back then. Alrighty, so have fun getting lunch. Thank you for stopping in and leaving a like, right? Always a pleasure to see you in the chat. And so we get to the island, and they get the attention by the British by shooting a freaking pistol off, a powder pistol, which back then was the only type of pistols they had. And I'm thinking, not the best idea to get their damn attention, you know? I mean, this was an English patrol that, again, will shoot anybody on sight. Well, there's a nice little scuffle, and they row off so that they can get the people, or so that they can keep the captain safe. However, Guy Pearce, Fernand, or Mondego, and Edmond Dantes are on the island, have to fight off the British because they were attacked. And then Napoleon actually steps in. He's like, if you want to kill these men, go ahead and kill them, except do so in the knowledge that they're no agents of mine. And he then tells them, it's like, state your business or be shot. And also he addresses a lieutenant, Graypool or something like that. I think it's Graypool. However, if you look at his insignia for his rank, it's clearly a sergeant. So I'm guessing he was, or Napoleon, that could have been a mistake in the movie, or it could have been simply Napoleon taunting a person. It's like, Lieutenant, oh, sorry, you're a sergeant, that kind of thing. So they manage to convince the men, or the British, to help them with their captain, who's fallen into a coma due to brain fever, as they call it. And Napoleon asks Edmond Dantes to talk with him. And there's this moment where they give each other, or Fernand Mondego, Guy Pearce, and Dantes, they toss each other a king's piece from a chessboard, which is king of the moment kind of thing. And this catches Napoleon's attention, and he's like, what is with the king, or the king piece? And he's like, that's something that me and Mondego have been doing or if we have a fortuitous event, we're king of the moment. And he's like, this amuses Napoleon, and he says, kings are merely pawns in the greater game, even emperors. And so he asks Edmond Dantes, who presumes that Napoleon's motives are innocent, to deliver a letter, because the British always read his letters, which is pretty, that's now common practice. If you are in jail, any mail that comes into you or any mail going out is automatically proofread by them to ensure that you're not breaking the law. So, yeah, I have personal experience with that. So he says, it's just merely me writing an old acquaintance or asking for news from France. That's it. Well, Edmond Dantes can't read, so he can't tell that what's really in the letter is British troop formations, the times that they are patrolling and whatnot. Well, so Mondego sees him receive the letter from Napoleon, and Napoleon tells Dantes, tell no one of this, not even your best friend. Well, okay, except that he already saw. So we get back to France, and he's also going to be intercepted by a man named Clerion to take the letter and receive it. And so when they get home, they have to deal with the shipping owner, the owner of the Pharaon, which is the ship that they were a part of. Well, the ship's captain is dead because he dies there, and they say, you got to take off now, otherwise the British will be less accommodating. And so they take off. They arrive back in Marseille, which is where the main crux of the first act takes place. And we're introduced to Morel, who is a friend of Dantes, as well as everybody else. And he says, come on in. And let's see here. And Dangral is also the first mate of the second mate of the captain, or of the ship, the Pharaon, because Edmond Dantes was first mate, and therefore he was put in as captain because they basically, Dongral didn't do what he was supposed to. He's like, I told them not to go aboard or go ashore to Elba because it was where Napoleon is known to be captain. He's like, or I was looking after the ship. And the owner's like, you were looking after yourself. Dantes did the right thing. Therefore, Dantes, you're going to be captain of the Pharaon. And you can, and the Dongral's pissed off a bit about this. He's like, you presume to demote me, or Donglar, not Dongral, but Donglar, sorry. And he's like, you presume to demote me. He's like, there's no demotion. Your position is staying the same as it was. You were not promoted. You were not demoted. You're still going to serve under Captain Dantes. Hey, how are you, Davian? Good to see you. I'm doing the Count of Monte Cristo. A nice little French tale. And so now he's getting his captaincy papers, and he's celebrating. He goes, and while he was up there, Mondego and Mercedes, who is the fiance of Edmund, who is always in love with Edmund, and wildly in love with him, by the way, she and Mondego go to the rock where they always meet, and Mondego is doing his best to. This is the 2002 version with Jim Caviezel and Guy Pearce. And Mondego's like, make love to me. And she's like, no. Dantes would never know. I would. And so she's like, you've always been jealous of Edmund. And you want me to be the pony that you got. And Edmund got a whistle on his birthday. And you were so jealous of Edmund because he enjoyed his whistle more than your pony. So Mondego is of a high-class family. He is rich, or his family is rich. His father is a count, Mondego, and where Edmund is the son of a clerk. He's of a poor bloodline. So yeah, he doesn't like that Edmund has a very humble life. He doesn't like that Edmund enjoys things in a much greater way that are mundane. And Guy Pearce, playing this role, plays it so freaking well because you can see the jealousy and the resentment on his face perfectly. It is just plain as day, yet nobody else picks up on it. And Mercedes does tell him, it's like, you've always been jealous of Edmund. And because of that very reason, and I'm not going to be your next whistle. So yeah, that's when Dantes shows up and he lets everybody know, or he lets them know, I've been made captain. I don't have to wait 2 more years because that's how long he had to wait before he gets his captaincy. But with the fortuitous events of the captain dying, he's now made captain because of his bravery to try to treat the captain on Elba. Well, we then see that he gets the king, and he's celebrating with, or goes swimming with Mercedes. They have a nice little tender lovemaking scene that's not shown. However, it's shown with them kissing and naked, but the rock in front of them hides everything else. So this actually plays later in the film for what happened, or for an important thing that happens in the film later on. And he's like, once I can afford to get the ring, she's like, I don't need a ring. And she grabs a string from his shirt, wraps it and ties it onto her finger. This will be my ring, she says, with the string. And I will never take it off because I will never stop loving you. And I really the actress who plays her, Digmara, actually does a wonderful job with it. She shows that she is truly devoted to Edmund, even when shit goes sideways. Yes, she marries Fernand, his best friend. However, this is, or what plays later on, is truly magnificent. Neozoic. How would you compare the Count of Monte Cristo with other revenge films such as John Wick, Kill Bill, Unforgiven, Mad Max, Old Boy, Death Wish, Crow? The Count of Monte Cristo is one of the older revenge stories, and it's a long game of revenge. And honestly, this is a tale of revenge that takes place over 16 years, or around 16 years, where another great revenge story is Star Wars, which is the Revenge of the Sith, which the Sith have been plotting their revenge for over 1,000 years. A long game of vengeance, if you are truly going to get vengeance on somebody, playing the long game, being patient, learning your enemies, learning their weaknesses, their habits, and all of that. The Punisher from 2004, everybody says, well, that's not a revenge film, that's a punishment film. It's still vengeance. The way that he does it is pretty much like the Count of Monte Cristo. I mean, while those movies are great and all, yes, they're action-packed as well, this movie takes the act of vengeance to a whole new level, because Edmond Dantes is ruined. His life, his fiance, his family, all gone because of him being accused and arrested for something he never did. And so he sets out to do the same to them. And Mercedes is also on the list of vengeance because he finds out that she married Mondego after he gets out of prison after 13 years. But so he's celebrating with Mercedes, and that's when the police show up because Danglars and Mondego plot against him. You see, remember, Mondego saw him receive the letter from Napoleon. So when the magistrate, Villefort, stands his accusal against him, he's told, I knew nothing of what this, or I didn't know what, he assured me it was innocent. I did not know. And he's like, well then, sir, you are indeed guilty of being a fool and naive, but you are innocent in the matter of treason. So you're free to go. And then he asks, he's like, by the way, did Napoleon say who was supposed to receive this letter? Monsieur Clarion. What name did you say? Monsieur Clarion. Well, then he burns the letter. A chief magistrate burning evidence of treason. And then he's like, I will take you to my private carriage. I'm sorry for this inconvenience. He puts him in a jail carriage, sending him to, and he's like, but I was told I can go home. Your new home is Chateau d'If. And that's when Dantes freaks out. Well, he ends up evading the law and going to his friend Fernand's house. Well, Fernand pretends to be his friend and then pulls the sword, and he's like, wait, he's like, I told them about the letter. I turned you in. Why? It's complicated. But why did you do this? Because you're the son of a clerk, and I'm not supposed to want to be like you. Or I'm not supposed to want to be you. That is such a great line. Because you're the son of a clerk, and I'm not supposed to want to be you. So we then get the fight between Fernand and Edmund, and you see that Edmund is clearly outclassed in swordplay. And there is a small little technical goof where Edmund knocks over a bust, and pieces, or the broken pieces, scatter across the floor, but they cut away to when he goes towards the window, and the next shot showing the room, The bust is broken, but the pieces are gone. So it's like, oh crap, you know. Hey, Ruben Thomas, good to see you. And yes, The Punisher 2004 is indeed underrated. I mean, Kill Bill and all those other ones are indeed good revenge films. However, A Long Game of Vengeance is truly a tale worth telling. Let's just say that. And you know what? I might actually submit that as a quote by me. The Long Tale of Vengeance is truly a tale worth telling. Let it know that Orange Hat Review said that first. So the magistrate confronts his father, who is Sir Clarion, and he's an agent of Napoleon. He even has a walking stick that is the ornation on the top of it is Napoleon's head. And he's unabashedly loyal and outspokenly loyal to Napoleon, to the emperor. You know, long live the emperor, and when he returns, I shall be rewarded, and yada yada yada. And he also shows he really doesn't care for his children, his son or his son's wife. And we then get to Chateau d'If, where Edmond Dantes is shown or taken, and Michael Wincott plays the warden Duliac. Now, Michael Wincott has played in roles that I liked, like in Alien Resurrection. He plays the captain of the Betty. He also plays Rochefort in the Three Musketeers movie that Disney did back in the 90s. He plays really good villainous characters. He plays Top Dollar in The Crow. And his voice, he has such a grovelly voice that is truly villainous, you know? And I think that he does such a wonderful job with it. And he tells Mondego, he's like, of course I know you're innocent. I mean, why else would you be here? Even treasonous people would go to other prisons. There are dozens of prisons in France that they could have sent you, yet they sent you to Chateau d'If, where people disappear and are never heard from again. Well, then a letter is written, or before we get to the letter, we get to them taking Dantes to his room, and they say, we have a tradition here where we beat a person, or we whip a person, we hurt them every year on the anniversary of their incarceration. However, we make the first one truly special. And they whip him badly, man. He gets whipped across his back very long, let's just say that. And so then cutting back to what's going on in Marseille, well, Villefort, the magistrate, has, or where would you rank Crow among the revenge movies? Well, The Crow, I would put that up around the top 5 of my favorite revenge films. This one is my favorite revenge film. Revenge of the Sith is my second one because I have a soft spot for Star Wars still. John Wick is definitely number 3. Or rather, Crow is number 3, Wick is number 4, and Kill Bill would actually be number 5 because Kill Bill is decent, or I do like that one. It's actually a long tale of vengeance. However, it's not the same type of vengeance as Count of Monte Cristo. So, or Punisher is actually also in my top 5. I should really amend that. So Count of Monte Cristo, Count of Monte Cristo, Revenge of the Sith, The Crow, Punisher, and then John Wick. So yes, Kill Bill will be kicked off of the top 5. Made top 6 though. So then we see that Fernand Mondego is pleading with the magistrate for the innocence of Edmond Dantes. Well, he tells him that Dantes has been charged with treason and conspiring with agents of Napoleon to try to help in Napoleon's escape. And then Mondego and the magistrate basically drop their pretense, and that's when Mercedes later receives a letter about Mondego being executed for his crimes. She thinks he's dead, so she finds comfort in Fernand Mondego because she thinks Edmund is dead, rather. And it's like, wow, you moved on rather quickly. However, there is a reason for this. There's a secret that she is keeping. And we also learn later, after his escape, that Dantes' father killed himself out of depression because he knew that his son was never a traitor. So the years pass, and you see 1 year has passed, and it's time for him to get whipped again. 4 years later pass, and he's getting whipped again. And he's learning to, or he's always asked, what was my crime? He never understood what his crime was. And he also believes that God will give him justice because that is also written on the wall. But he then feels that he is abandoned by God. And then we meet Abbe Faria, who breaks into his cell from the floor. And Richard Harris, his acting is so freaking great in this film. He's like, and there's a beautiful line that Dante says, there are 72,519 stones in my cell. I have counted them all. And then Abbe Faria tells him, but have you named them yet? And he starts despairing. He's like, no, I can help you. And so they plan this elaborate plan for escape, where he's like, I can teach you things, how to read, how to write, or economics, and or science and math and all of this stuff. And he's like, could you teach me to write or read and write? Yes, I can also teach you that. And so he's learning all of this stuff as they become fast friends. And over the next, he's been in there for 4 years. So the next 9 years, or 8 years rather, because it's more 13 years. And then he spends another 2.5 years abroad with Vampa. But so they're for the time that they're digging, they're trying to dig to the outer wall to get out. Well, and as he's reading, or he tells him, he's like, compute the math of how many rocks, how far we're going in a month, weeks, and years and whatnot. And then he's like, now do it in Italian. And then you see him getting whipped again, where he's not even feeling it, and he's speaking it in Italian to himself. I love how they show the passage of time here. Now, you would think that over time, he's actually would be withering. His body would be withering. Well, there is a moment where you see his shirt is kind of open, and you see that he's actually quite jacked. Jim Caviezel got in shape for this movie. Let's see here. Iron Man 3 and Prometheus are the only other films that I've seen Guy Pearce as a villainous role in. I haven't seen The Hurt Locker or Memento or LA Confidential. So, but he has a way of playing the overt, over-the-top villain. Because his Mondego is very much like his Aldrich Killian from Iron Man 3. And Peter Wayland is more sly, where he is he doesn't outright be a villain until later on when he's not, or when he's on death's door. So yeah, there is I would actually say that this role is very good, where a more sly villain is actually a better kind of villain, you know. And it's all right, Davian. I know you got to go, but yes, thank you so much. Definitely catch the rest of this great review. Talk to you later. Have a wonderful day, Davian. You have a good day. Because yes, I know it is of a later time over in Europe right now. I believe you're 6 hours ahead. So they also have another wonderful thing in this. When they do, or they actually show the tunnel and an outside look at the tunnel where it's all black except for the tunnel bit. And it is a really nice shot. And it shows how far they are progressing, how there are candles and whatnot, or they have little wax candles. And there's this nice scene where Abe tells him, "Do not waste the light," because Dantes is reading, and he's like, "You were an army, or you served Napoleon," or because Abe Faria did, or also told him of his crimes. He's like, "Yes, I served Napoleon. But when I was ordered to burn down a church with enemies inside, to my great shame, I did, but I deserted afterward. And I came across the Count of Spada, and I worked for him. Well, Napoleon had me arrested because he understood that Spada had found a treasure beyond count. So when I would not divulge where the treasure was, he threw me in here to try to refresh my memory, and here I have lasted." So he tells him, he's like, "Teach me the sword or dig alone." It is his one demand. It is his one demand. He requested to learn how to read and write, but his one demand is that he learns the way of the sword. Now, Abe Faria has also taken a vow of ordainment. He's a priest, essentially. And he also has renounced violence. Well, he's like, "You forced me to walk a fine line, Edmund, or Dantes. So I will teach you." And we see him learning speed, where he's got to shoot his hand under very quickly dripping water, but put it in and out before it gets wet. So he has to do it without getting wet, like that, or like that. And you see, there's that, and then here's Edmund, and it's like, of course you're gonna get wet, dude. You got to be quick. It's not always the strongest person with the sword who wins. It is the quicker person who gets it. The quicker person, and whatnot. I mean, Richard Harris plays this role so freaking well. He always plays a wise and older person in such great ways. He played Dumbledore very well in the first 2 Harry Potter films. I wish he had been able to last the decade as Dumbledore, because otherwise, Michael Gambon or Gamble or whatever his name was did a good Dumbledore, but Richard Harris was truly a good Dumbledore. Junebug, good to see you. How you doing? Always a pleasure. So we get to where am I in the talking points? The plan of escape. All right, his whippings no longer hurt. Speed of hand and speed of hand and mind. And as he's learning this stuff, he then finally puts together, or Edmund finally puts together what happened to him, the plot against him. Originally, it was just Danglars and Mondego, who he wished vengeance on. Now, Villefort, the magistrate, is added to it. And then we see more great cinematography of the tunnel cinematography. And they find roots among their latest endeavor. So they're getting close. Another couple months and they'll be home free. Well, unfortunately, there's then a quake that kills the priest, Abe Faria, and his plate is left behind. So when Abe is dying, they get him back to his cell, and he tells him, go to those loose rocks, pull up, and bring me what you find. It's a map of an island, Monte Cristo. Edmund's final lesson: do not commit the crime for which you now serve the sentence. And Edmund is still too consumed by vengeance. He wants vengeance and nothing else at this point. He wants to kill those who wronged him. I'm such a distraction. I made him lose his point. He was so thrilled with the choice. How you doing, June? It's always a pleasure, Junebug. Good to see you. So after Abe dies, and his plate wasn't placed there for the guards to put the slop in, the food. Well, they now check, and he's now dead. And Edmund amends the plan to escape. Instead of escaping through a tunnel, he goes back to his cell with Abe's body after they tied Abe's body up in a wrap. Well, he takes Abe's body, drags it back to his cell, and takes the place and wraps himself back up in the wrap instead. And so Doliak and the others finally arrive to take the body out and dump it in the ocean off a cliff. And the guy who's sending food here and there, he finds out that the bodies have been switched, and he's like trying to get their attention. And he gets there at the last moment where they're swinging back and forth, counting to 3 to dump the body in the ocean, when the guy comes out, and Michael Wincott's like trying to listen to the guy. And that's when Caviezel grabs the keys to the chains at his feet so he would sink, and pulls Doliak into the water. Did you see Caviezel's other revenge movie with Rona Mitra, the car killer one? Find out what it is, please, what the name of it is, because Rona Mitra is also a great actress. And I'll definitely check it out if I can. And so Dantes finally escapes, and he also kills Doliak, and then he swims over to another island. Well, there are some pirates, and led by the great man Vampa. And I gotta say, their reason for being there is because Jacopo tried to steal some gold that they raided, and now that some of them want to kill him and some of them want to keep him alive for good sport and whatnot. So it's like, well, if you kill Jacopo, you could take your place on my ship and we'll be better, or you can serve some time there and whatnot. And he's like, all right, well, clearly you haven't got it around, because Jacopo is definitely not the best policeman there. Now, Jim Caviezel has such an underrated actor, but sadly, there's a reason why he's underrated in Hollywood. Yes, it's because he's unabashedly Christian and unabashedly conservative. He's not afraid of his he doesn't hide his Christian beliefs. Caviezel is a great actor. Passion of the Christ, Person of Interest, Frequency are among his greatest works, in my opinion. Plus many others that are this one as well. Count of Monte Cristo as well. So he has the knife fight with Jacopo, and he wins, and he tells him, stay here or do not move a muscle and you will live, or you might well just get out of this. And so he says he's lost the fight. Those of you who wanted him to lose, and those of you who wanted him or wanted good sport, both sides are satisfied. Let him live and serve under me. And he's like, fine, you keep an eye on him and whatnot. And so he also swears on. Luis Guzman always adds a little bit into his lines. He's a good improviser. He's like, on the souls of those or of my family who are dead, and the souls of those not doing too good, I will serve you and I will always protect you. And it's like those not doing too good. That's definitely a freaking improvised one. Would Return of the Jedi count as a revenge since film number 1? Luke redeem Vader, Anakin avenge all the Jedi. No, because a Jedi does not seek revenge. A Jedi does not seek revenge. And yes, that is why they changed Revenge of the Jedi to Return of the Jedi, because the Jedi does not seek revenge. Neozoic. So, yeah. We then get a 2.5 years. However, they say 3 months later. It's actually 3 years later, or 2.5 to be more specific, because it takes him 6 months to establish the role of the Count of Monte Cristo, and then to exact his revenge. So, the 6 months revenge plan after he's finally no longer on Vampa's ship when they return to Marseille. That is a big major objective flaw in this film. They say 3 months later when it's actually 3 years, or 2.5 to be more specific. So when they do this, Vampa tells him, you got to be, or don't be afraid to return and whatnot to your home and whatnot, or live a life not on the ship. And he goes by the name Zatara now, because Zatara means driftwood. It's also a lot better than being known for what he used to be, you know? And Vampa and Dantes depart as friends. Well, Jacopo and Dantes search for vengeance, and we see that Danglars took over the shipping industry and forced Morel out. And Morel is visited by Dantes, and he doesn't recognize him, as over 13 years have passed. So he learns that Mercedes is married to Count Mondego, which is Fernand now, because Fernand's father had perished. And Mondego and Mercedes now live in Paris. Well, now Mercedes is added to the vengeance list, because she seemed to have moved on pretty freaking quickly. And so we see that, we then see that Dantes gets a skiff with Jacopo, and they go to the island of Monte Cristo. And it's beautiful and suspenseful music and cinematography as well. And when they find the treasure, Jacopo's like, so what do you want to do? You are richer than any man I have ever known. What do you want to buy? Vengeance. And he's like, okay, well, or vengeance against who? And he, Villefort, Mondego, Mercedes, all those who helped ruin my life. And he's like, okay, well, I can go to Paris and I can kill them all, bam, 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 and then we could spend the treasure on whatever we want. We don't need, or how is this a bad plan? He's like, they must suffer as I have suffered. My life was ruined because of their actions. So they will suffer as I have suffered. This is an absolute conviction of Edmond Dantes. Now, if you are going through with something, you need that level of conviction in order to go through with it. Meaning, do not let anything stand in your way, not even what is perceived is goodness. Well, here's the thing, folks. We then see they purchase a house in Paris off of this guy who owns the house, and it's like, we're here to buy your lovely home. And he's like, get out of here before I get sick the dogs on you. And then he opens the back end of a carriage, which a bunch of gold fucking spills out, and jewels and shit. Now, you could really tell that the jewels are fake. I mean, I think they went the plastic jewel route, which is not always the best idea. So it's like, those are clearly fake. But it served the purpose for the bit, and so you see them getting handed the deed to the estate and the keys to it as well. And so then you see the place getting set up, invitations going out all over, invitations to Villefort, to Mondego, to all these other people, and we then see that Jim Caviezel has gotten a makeover. His beard is trimmed. He's looking more rich, shall we say. And I absolutely love the introduction to the Count of Monte Cristo, where the hot air balloon he's coming in on is then illuminated and revealed by the fireworks in the background. This is beautiful cinematography, folks. And it is done in such a great way that it's almost as if he just came out of nothing. He just appeared. That's it. And then he says, greeting, or good evening, and then walks away, and everybody's starting to be introduced to him. And they're like, what do we know of this guy? Not a lot, because Villefort is very, he wants to learn about the Count. His wife is like, what do we know about him, you know? So we then see that Mondego did not attend because Fernand had a morning duel that he had to attend. So because he was sleeping with another guy's wife, and the other guy challenged him to a duel, and the guy lost. And we also learn from Mercedes that he's constantly cheating on her. So he's like, Paris and I were hardly a formula for fidelity. And she's like, yeah, I know, since the last 3 other women that you used and whatnot. And he's like, well, now that my infidelity has been out there, I honestly do not see the reason to keep up pretenses, you know? Hey, Biggles, good to see you, man. It's Count of Monte Cristo, 2002, Jim Caviezel, Guy Pearce. And good to see you, man. And so we also cut to Fernand Mondego losing money on casinos, and so Dantes takes over the bank and to ruin Mondego, and so he now has to return to Danglars to use his shipping. And we then see that Dantes is sleeping on the floor instead of a bed because as he says it, it's like 13 years of sleeping on a slab. A bed is way too comfortable. I can kind of relate because once you get used to that level of discomfort for any sustained amount of time, your body will not react to comfort in the same way. So we then see that, let's see here. We then see Albert Mondego, played by Henry Cavill, and he wants to go to Rome for an early 16th birthday present. And this is when Mondego is starting to have financial strain. Sorry for the camera shake, folks. I'm on a table and the camera moves a little too much. So we see that he goes to Rome, and Dantes and Jacopo set it up so that he's going to be kidnapped. He's led down into some catacombs in Rome, and I immediately recognize the voice of Vampa, who's going to cut off his finger and send it to Count Mondego for a ransom. Well, Cavill played it so well. He's like, I am the son of Count Mondego. Do your worst. And that's when Edmond Dantes comes in and beats the would-be ransomers and tells them, let him go or I'll start cutting off things more vital and whatnot. So they let him go, and then he tosses some coins to Vampa, who comes into view, revealing it's him, because he says, I may come or I may call on you sometime in the future. And he's like, I love how they parted as good friends, because Vampa helps him later on when Villefort and Mondego try to rob him. So we then get him to hosting Albert at his mansion in Rome, and Albert hears about the Spada matter and the gold, which is shipment. He purposefully slips it. I love how they act as if it's trying to be concealed. It's like the gold shipment, sorry, Your Majesty, shipment will be arriving, and well, Albert, being a good son, reports to his father that he heard words Spada and gold. So when when he goes to visit or goes back to Paris to visit Albert in Paris at the Mondego house or the Mondego estate, you see, or they finally meet the Mondegos, and immediately Mercedes almost pretty much recognizes him. She feels that she heard that he is dead because she received a letter that he was executed. However, she immediately kind of recognizes him. And there's a clever moment where she dances with him. And I love this when he finally meets Mondego. He's like, "May I steal your wife? I beg your pardon? For the waltz." And it's okay, Neozoic. You have a good day. Yeah, you'll see me in the Barroom podcast tonight. Have a good day, dude. So we then see a dance between Mercedes and the Count, which is anything but a waltz. I mean, I know what a waltz is. I've seen a waltz done several times. I've never danced a waltz because I have 2 left feet when it comes to waltz or dancing. But yeah, let's just say that it is an older dance. I'm well aware. I just had a very unpleasant memory. Sorry for that, yeah, folks. But anyway, we see that he has to give the toast to Albert because his father is now talking with, or Mondego's talking with Villefort to discuss matters to steal from the Count because they overheard the shipment of Spada and gold. So they're planning on stealing from Mondego, or Mondego's planning on stealing from Monte Cristo. Well, it's set up so that Danglars tries stealing it, doesn't work very well because Jacopo takes the gold that was meant to go onto the ship, or Danglars' ship, and well, yeah. But going back to the party, the Count of Monte Cristo gives the toast, sparing Mercedes some pain because she was tearfully about to give the toast. However, the Count of Monte Cristo gives a rather uplifting toast to Albert, and she says thank you to him, but she also notices that he has a towel where he's twirling his hair behind his ear. And that is something that she always recognized Edmund doing when they were together years before, because there was that small tell that he was doing it. And she's like, "You'll pull your hair out. Stop doing that." And so he notices. And so she approaches him in his cabin or in his carriage to try, or starts kissing on him and whatnot. She's like, I'm sorry, I do not want to betray your reputation. Your reputation is at stake if you do this. And she's like, I don't care and whatnot. And she's like, Edmund, where have you been and whatnot? I'm not this Edmond. And so he's like, this Dantes, did you love him? And she's like, very much. Then you seem to have ran to the arms of Mondego as soon as he died. She's like, that's not fair. Well, I'm sorry, ma'am, but you need to go. Now, notice, or he said something that truly betrayed knowledge that he was not supposed to have, so to speak, which he said the name Dantes. That comes to play later. when she confronts him again. But Jacopo is back in the carriage, and he pulls me. He's like, if you ever presume to interfere in my affairs again, I will forget that you are my servant. And Jacopo tells him, I swore to serve you, man. And that means protecting you to get, or you have a woman who loves you, leave this vengeance behind. He's trying to convince him, leave it behind. Take the girl, take the money, and disappear. And he told him, I am always going to be your man, Zatara. And I will always protect you, even if that means protecting you from yourself. That is a great freaking line. Jacopo is my favorite character. Exactly. I mean, Luis Guzman plays such great characters in the movies that he does. Arnold Schwarzenegger's comeback to fame, The Last Stand, Luis Guzman plays a great character in that one too, where he's trying to put or he has a Conan sword, and he's also putting Morningstar or Chain and Morningstar into his pants, and he's like, and Schwarzenegger's like, what are you on a fucking crusade? You never know. it's just so freaking great, man. But so the next scene, we get the shipping of gold to Marseille. And we then see that, let's see here, the robbing of the shipment of Marseille, and Danglars, he's like, I'm not going to hang for Mondego. Mondego set me up and whatnot. Well, the police show up to arrest Danglars for his attempting to steal, and Dantes, he's like, or he grabs a piece of rope on the ship, wraps Danglars' neck around it, puts him out to hang for a little bit. He's like, let me on. He's like, or who are you? Well, I'm the Count of Monte Cristo. However, my close friends call me Edmond Dantes. And he then suddenly recognizes him, and he's like, Dantes. And he walks away. He could have easily freaking left Danglars to hang. However, he's like, cut him down before he can't speak. So Danglars is now out of the way. So now he confronts Villefort in a bathhouse, getting the steam to build in the house. And he admits to his crimes in front of the police. How he hired Mondego to kill Clarion, his father, for being a Napoleon sympathizer, so that they could take their family's estates and their positions, because Mondego's father was also in poor health back then. And so he admits conspiracy to murder with the police in that room. And then he's like, how could you have known this stuff? And he then notices that it's Dantes there. So Villefort is then arrested and put into into a police carriage, and there's a powder pistol right next to him. And the constable says, a small courtesy for a gentleman. Well, this movie was shot with this scene in two different ways. One where the powder or the pistol had powder in it, and one where it didn't. The test screening of this film had the loaded pistol, where Villefort kills himself. Where the other one has, or they were like, that's not really, or test audiences didn't really reverberate well with it. So they now have where it is Villefort with an empty pistol. He puts the pistol in his mouth, pulls the trigger, there's nothing happens. And then you see Dantes come up between the bars in the front. You didn't think I would make it that easy for you, did you? Knowing now that Villefort is out of the way. So he then goes home, and there's Mercedes again, proving she still loves him. This scene is very powerful. He's like, or he confronts her, and she lifts her hand, or she lifts her left hand, revealing the string on her finger. Now, folks, that string has been on her finger for 13 years. Hasn't been frayed, hasn't been dirtied. It is still perfectly there. That is a bit of a technical goof. So it's like, that is some very strong twine, man. And she says, I told you years ago I would never remove it and that I would love you for all the days of my life. And he's like, if you love me, don't take this away from me. It's all I have left. His vengeance against Mondego is all he has left, even in the face of her being right there with him. Well, then they have that nice night together. She can actually talks him down, and he tells her, go home, pack your stuff. Or the next morning, it's Jacopo telling her, or he says to pack your stuff. You're going to leave the country with the count and your son, and whatnot. Well, we then see her returning to her home, and Mondego is packing stuff, throwing everything around, and he's like, I'm bankrupt. And she's like, okay, what are you doing? I'm fleeing the country. I've already made arrangements. I'm also to be arrested. For what? Piracy, corruption, and murder. So she's like, I'm not going with you, Fernand. And he starts throwing a fit, and he's like, my son is not, or you're not going to take my son. He's not yours. And this actually gets him to stop. Why do you think I married you so quickly after Edmond was arrested? He is the son of Edmond Dantes, not you. Well, no wonder he was such a disappointment. Goodbye, Mercedes. You did please me sometimes. And then he leaves her behind, and she's like, you never pleased me. It's like, oh, shit. Now, here's the thing, folks. This moment, Mondego could have easily killed her. Wouldn't have mattered. He has nothing left to lose. He could have easily killed her. Instead, he lets her live, and he flees to his old house or his old estate, one that has been burned down and ruined. And we see that the robbery of the gold that he robbed is nothing but dirt. However, there is a locked one that he opens up, and he finds a king's piece from a chessboard, the same one that Edmond Dantes gave to him, or that he gave to Edmond Dantes before Dantes was carted off to prison 16 years before. So, sorry. He's like, Count, sorry, I didn't see you there. And he's like, he comes in and he's like, kings to you, Fernand. And that's when he recognizes him. Edmund? Why are you doing this? It's complicated. He throws it right back in his face, man. I absolutely love that. And he then does the quick disarmament when he pulls the sword, and he tells him, how could you ever call yourself my friend? And he slashes him, and he's ready to kill him, but then Albert interferes. And during this time, Mondego takes the time to load a pistol. Well, Albert is like, I'm not going to let you kill him. If you touch him again, I will kill you. Well, Mondego or Dantes doesn't know that this guy or that Albert is his son yet. So he's like, if you stand in my way, you will die too. There's a history here you do not know nothing about. And so he's like, or he quickly disarms Albert because Albert refuses to stand down. And he tells him, if you stand in my way, so be it, you're dead. Well, that's when Mercedes yells out no and stops them all. And she tells Albert the truth. And Dantes also realizes, it's like, oh shit, I almost killed my son, you know? You see the shocked look on his face, but then you see the shocked look on Albert's face as he looks to who he thought was his father. He's like, and you would have let me fight him? Yes, I would have been perfect. I mean, now that you know that your mother is a whore in earlier stages in her life. I mean, he's just throwing it. He's unabashedly, unashamed, villainous. Maybe she just replaces it and lies about never taking it off. I mean, that would probably be it, but it works better that she never did take it off, because it was also tied in the same way. So Mondego decides to flee. He's like, I want no more part of this. This is when Edmund finally let go. He's like, I want no more part of this. Consider it mercy. Well, Mondego pulls the pistol, points it. He's like, if you shoot me, you only got one shot, and it's going to take more than that to kill me or to stop me. Let it go, Fernand, and get the hell out of here. You're right. It won't stop you. So maybe I need to use it or put it to where it will do the most damage. And he points it at Mercedes, but before he can get the shot off, Jacopo threw a knife at him, turning the pistol, making the shot go wide, but still hitting Mercedes. So then he flees and whatnot, and then he turns around. He can't run. His life was ruined by the son of a clerk. He calls out Edmund, and he wants Edmond to fight him. And he tells him, I could never live in a world where you have everything and I have nothing. He cannot live by that reversal. So we get the fight between Edmond and Mondego. And we see that Edmond gets disarmed, but then grabs the sword, or grabs one of the swords, disarms Mondego, and puts it through his chest in a nice little spin disarmament. And before he goes out, I should say this, where Jacopo was telling him to let go of his vengeance. At this point, when you see Mercedes on the ground and they're treating her wound, he says, this has been started, now it has to be finished. Jacopo tells him, he's like, you go out there and you finish it. Jacopo is now pro-vengeance at this point, because now he realizes that Mondego will not leave them alone. So after killing him, they finally go back to Chateau d'If, and he says, I bought this place in hopes to tear it down. However, it's going to be a reminder. And he also makes a promise in memory of the priest and to God, with newfound faith, I will use what I have no more for vengeance, but for good for now, or for here on out. It is finished. I am no longer that man anymore. And you see that Mercedes is holding her stomach, because this is 3 months later at Chateau d'If, and you see that she's holding her stomach, which is a clear indication she might be pregnant again. I mean, they did have another night of passion and whatnot before she went to tell Mondego the truth that she's leaving. So, yeah. And also, he's like, I bought this island, or I bought this place to tear it down, but now I'm going to be leaving with the only 3 people that matter to me, because Jacopo is still with him. And then as they walk off of Chateau d'If, it shows the words in his cell, God will give me justice. And that's the end of the film. Now, while there are continuity errors, which you really got to look hard to find, there's factual errors. The imprisoned count is crawling through a tunnel, or not imprisoned count, but the imprisoned Abbe Faria. His neighbor prisoner has a lit candle showing the way, but when he breathes out, the candle goes out, but the light remains, small little things like that. The string lasting for 16 years. There's supposedly a car scene way in the back, or a white car driving by in the climax of the film 7 seconds after Mercedes says no or screams out no. There's a shot of all the characters involved in the scene, and yet if you look out the door, you see a white car drive by. It's very blink and you'll miss it. Continuity mistakes where Mercedes confronts Edmund for the second time and he finally admits who he is. She makes the point of showing him the string. 2 scenes later, when she's on the ground and shot, you could see on her hand the string is not going to be on her finger. I never noticed that because honestly it wasn't important at the time. Visible crew and equipment very near the end when they are doing a pan out of the deserted building. There are 3 of the 5 characters standing in plain view. The other 2 are in the building. One is helping the other cope with a wound. When they pan out and look through the bottom right window hole, there is someone standing there. So it's definitely crew. A factual error. When Edmond Dantes is promoted to captain, we clearly see a brass diving helmet on a shelf in the office. Augustus Siebes' hard hat diving dress wasn't invented until 1819 and didn't appear into the movie until at least 1837. And this movie, I believe, took place in 1814, or that part of the movie. So yeah, there's a bit of a problem there. And there's other small little tiny bits here and there, which I also called out. But other than that, objectively, this movie is about an 8.5. You got to look really hard to see the errors. And you got to really be a history buff to notice some stuff. However, in subjective, this movie is a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love The Count of Monte Cristo. I only saw this movie last year for the first time, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It is such a great film of a long game of vengeance that truly holds to a person who finally lets go of his vengeance, but has to continue on with it anyway because, well, the subject of his vengeance won't let him go or won't let him be rid of it. Moviegoer, this film does have a slight pacing issue, so it's a 9.5 out of 10. I really like it, but I will say that it does have a little bit of pacing here and there. It's like, all right, let's get to the next scene. But once it starts the vengeance, it kicks off really well. Henry Cavill was I believe he was around 19 when he did this role, but he was playing a 16-year-old rather well. Or 15, almost 16, shall we say. But he did it very well. And this movie it really was well done. I enjoyed this movie immensely. Saw it for the first time in 2008 because of a girl and then never wanted to watch it again until 2020. I've watched it 6 times since 2020. Nice. It really is a good movie, to be completely honest. It really is it's a great movie. It's a great tale. And I plan on actually reading the novel sometime later this year. As for hints for next week, well, if you look at your calendar and find out what Tuesday or what the date for Tuesday is, it is July 4th. So next week's mystery review, I'm going to make it very easy, folks. It's obvious. That's your hint. It's obvious. So, yes. Stay tuned for next week. Thank you to Biggles Mets, Vanya, Neozoic, Davian Donaldson, Junebug, Riot Kitty, Ruben Thomas, Sexy Goth Girl, and anybody else who may have been in the chat. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have got to get going because I got to get my dinner eaten up. So, yeah, I'm having an early dinner today because other stuff going on. Stay tuned for next week. Also, stay tuned for tonight. I will be on the Bar Room podcast with Society Reviews. You can go to his channel, Society Reviews, and tune in there. It will be at 9 p.m. And I should be able to make it the whole time because I will be home for the whole time this time. So yeah, thank you to everybody tuning in. Also, stay tuned for next month's ones and twos with Mara. Also, I have the singles coming up. I'm going to be doing standalone movies with Mara on my channel on Thursdays. We're still ironing out details. The first movie is going to be Big Trouble in Little China, and I'm planning on Highlander or the original Highlander. But if not, we'll definitely figure something else. I'll have a more clear date when July swings around. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Y'all are freaking amazing people. Have a wonderful day, and always remember, stay humble.